Oi, what's the best game where you get to eat pie? What's the best game where you play a dead guy? Aye, you'll find out in VG247's podcast. Here, what's the best game where you swing from a rope? And what's the best game where you batter the Pope? Assassin's Creed 2. Like I said, you will find out in this here podcast. Hello and welcome to VG247's Best Games Ever podcast, where we attempt to find the best game within a very specific category. For example, this week, it's actually not a daft category this week. We're looking for the best games as a service game that you like despite itself. Because I think we all like at least one despite itself, and it is despite itself because they're terrible. Universally, generally. There's one or two ones that sort of stand above the rest, but in general, it's really sort of fitting that the abbreviation is GAAS.
Yep.
That's a metaphor I don't need to expand on. Right. We've got a lot to get through because everyone has a pick now. I have a pick now. That's one of the recent changes that we haven't explained to Sharif yet, and he was just kicking off about that. So just to explain to everyone, including the audience, this podcast is going to have a paid extended version soon. But at the moment, we're just doing the extended version for everyone. Just so people know what they're getting into if they do subscribe. The subscription will be $2.99, and you'll also get benefits on VG247, such as ad-free browsing and things like that. So, so this is a longer version of the usual podcast, but it won't be that way forever unless you, damn it, double down and give us some money. So, Sharif, at the end of all this, I'm going to present my pick for you guys to pick apart, because usually it's the other way around. And it makes it slightly less excruciating for me to have to pick one and have at least two of my colleagues be slightly miffed with me for the rest of the week, which is, it's not usually great. So yeah, the best games as a service game that you like despite itself. I think first I want to hear from Sharif, because I haven't spoken to Sharif for a while. What have you got?
Oh boy. Okay, so I was gonna pick Destiny 2 initially, because I played Destiny 2 fairly regularly, and by fairly regularly, I realized that I don't actually play it regularly. I play it once a year, and so that doesn't really qualify. Even though it is a live service game, I don't treat it as one. I just treat it as a single-player game that comes out with a new expansion.
So you just play it, but you're really aloof.
Yeah, I just played for a month, the month of the release of the expansion, and then I'm like, okay, I'm done with Destiny for another year. So I don't really treat it as a live service game, so it doesn't count. My actual pick for this one is a live service game by definition and intention, whether we like it or not. It's Diablo 4, which you talked a lot of mess about recently. An episode of like the games that you forgot came out. I was not very happy about that. Like Diablo 4.
I talked mess about it. Did I?
Not you specifically, but like there was a vibe about
that was Connor.
This game
Can we
being
start
forgettable.
blaming Connor for things Connor's done, please? I know it's early in the episode.
And he reviewed that game too, so you have to think about it. Like we fought Lilith together, and meant nothing to him that he would go on a podcast like that, and then we would just
nothing to
dunk.
Connor.
I had connection errors. I was teleporting all over the place, and we had a good laugh when I showed him the video of me just trying to monkey around the cutscene, the very serious cutscene of Lilith's demise, and I'm just like, whoop, 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 just jerking all over the place because of connection.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's Diablo 4. I have, last time I checked, when did the game come out? Did it come out in April last year? So it's
10,000 years ago.
I think it's, almost coming up on the first anniversary. I'm over 250 hours into that game now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm quite close to it being my most played game of all time, pretty much. Like if I continue on that pace, Diablo 4 is a live service Diablo game, which is pretty much what you think of when I tell you that term. If you know nothing about it, it has a battle pass, it has seasons, they run for a limited period of time. Mm-hmm. It is more generous than the usual quick turnaround of like Call of Duty and Fortnite and whatever. And I will tell you, I have tried to... my problem with live service games is that I can't wholeheartedly commit to one because I always have some misgivings about them. Like Call of Duty, I will play a Call of Duty for like a couple of weeks, maybe a couple of months. So I'm like, hey, I finished the battle pass on season 1, and then I'm never thinking about that game again because Call of Duty is still not my game. Even Battlefield, when they started doing battle passes, they started it. Unfortunately, was 2042. Not a good game. Wasn't really impressed with it, so didn't really care about the live service. I got into Fortnite for a little bit last year, and that seemed like it's going to be a long term.
I thought you were enjoying that.
I was, and I still enjoy it to this day. And I finished maybe 3 battle passes in that game, which was really unusual for me because I was just
where do people get the time for all this?
That's the thing. It's the one game. At Destiny, also, I got into one of their battle passes for a couple of seasons. I finished a couple, but I'm always I get to a point in Destiny where it's you need to set up play dates to get this extra content, extra tough content, and you need to have your build min-max to such a degree, and people will be I'm just I don't care. Fortnite.
If you're forced into being social, it's
but also you force into fitting into these builds and these molds the game, because no one's going to play with you if you don't have this weapon, because this weapon is needed for this particular encounter of the raid. No one's going to play with you if you don't have this particular whatever mod on your weapon. I'm just here to shoot some aliens, man. I don't care about whatever. I have a life outside of this, so I just stop playing. And once you kind of exhaust all the solo content in Destiny, the battle pass just grind becomes unusual. Fortnite has actually been the only one that's very friendly, because it's just do whatever and you're just earning XP all over the place. And so I just played that game and did not care at all. But then I was I feel like I was waiting for a game that I would really like, not unreservedly, but enough to ignore whatever things that I didn't like about it. And that game was Diablo 4, because Diablo 4 is, I really like Diablo. I think it's the most satisfying action RPG to play. And I think Diablo doubled down on all the elements that I love about that genre for me. And then they added the service element to that. So it was a natural progression for me. I was okay, I'm playing this game a lot. I'm going to play it a lot anyway. And now you're giving me an excuse to start a character every 3-ish months.
Do the live service elements not dilute some of the things that you like about the genre, though?
So they do. And that's what I'm going to get into. And also because of Diablo 4, other problems is, I guess, tying back into the subject of this episode. Diablo 4 has a lot of problems, and they seem to kind of step on rakes in a very unusual way for a big company like Blizzard. It's almost like you stop paying attention to them for 2 weeks, and then you look back, and then they have done some dumb thing. It's season 3 now, and the entire point of this season is just this most un-Diablo, un-RPG mechanic of just you avoiding traps like it's a Prince of Persia game. I'm just and so I mentioned this in my review and talking to people about it, but I avoided picking up loot because it was going to hurt me to step into the firing line of a poison arrows or some fire pit. Avoiding to pick up loot in a Diablo game. Are you what? What happened where we're at this point? So a lot of poor decisions like that make it hard to stick with. And they have some major issues with the end game. They've shipped with a bunch of missing features, stash problems, itemization problems, even.
It sounds like you should have picked Fortnite, if I'm being honest.
But I'm not playing Fortnite. That's the thing. The Diablo 4, even now, I'm so committed to just playing Diablo because it's such an easy game to get into, and as an ARPG with a core focus on combat, but not a lot around that, it's easy to put a podcast in it around it and listen to something when you're playing. So it's a very low energy game, which makes it just easy to do when you're not I don't want to play at a real game where I need to focus.
So I've got a couple of questions for you, Shu. So the first one is you mentioned with other games as a service, other kind of raid based games or whatever, that nobody will play with you because you haven't got the special Helldusk boots or whatever. Is that not literally the same in Diablo 4, and even more so? Is that not specifically the one where people are you don't have the right cape, get lost?
No, not at all. Diablo 4 doesn't really have any group content unless you choose to do it. It's I play the game pretty much 99.5% of my time solo, and that's why I love it. It's because I don't have to deal with anyone else. The worst that I would have to do, public events, you would go to a public event and you'll find some people there because it's on the map for everybody. World bosses the same way. the worst like annoying thing is that you will stand next to a dungeon, do a spinny thing with your cape, and then as a sort of signal to say, I am looking for someone to help me with that dungeon. And those are usually like the 6 bosses that are in the game. And then someone is going to immediately invite you to your party. And then you will do the thing. It will be done in 20 minutes. Like I never had to go on a forum and be looking for groups. Some people do, obviously, if you're grinding like the upper echelon of levels, which is something that I'm not interested in and I never will. Like I've never gotten a character to level 100, which is the cap. Like I don't care. Like I usually lose interest at about 75, 85 level. And then I'm like, okay, if I have a bunch of cool things, I have a bunch of cool abilities, I'm just going to start a new character, or I'm just going to park it for now and then go play something else. So that's...
Yeah. So that kind of like leads on to a little bit of what Jim said, but what's your kind of opinion on the Diablo 4 is one of the best examples of a game that shouldn't be a live service game, that this is just kind of like tacked on. It should be a thing. It should always have been that single player thing. It should always been that sort of soft multiplayer thing. And it's just an example of kind of unwieldy greed that they've tacked on all of this stuff.
Yeah, I always get the impression with Diablo 4 that it's like the live service element of it. Not necessarily. It's obviously been designed for that, but like the fact that it's been designed for that is not really a creative decision as much as it's a business decision. So
yeah. It absolutely feels like a sign of times, because you can't convince an executive that this game would come out and be just like Diablo 3, and just which Diablo 3, by the way, on PC still requires an online connection. Like it's not an offline game on PC. They never allowed for offline on PC. So they could have done the same with this, but you wouldn't be able to sell that to an executive in this era. So it needed the battle pass. It needed all the other elements around it of seasons. Which is it's kind of a lot for a game like this, and it feels unnecessary. But also, I think that also again links back to the idea of, in spite of itself, in spite of like it's not quite a live service game, it's not quite an MMO because you don't really run into other players, or
no.
There is no even like social content in the game. There's no group finder. You can't say like there's player trading, but again, this is for very specific groups of people who have the sickest roll on the sickest item and they want to trade it for it. And it's like, I don't care. Like, I just genuinely don't care. So it's just like, I'm playing this as a solo game and occasionally running into other player and saying hello because of like the emote wheel on the thing, and being moderately upset when someone doesn't say hello back because it's rude. Like if I'm saying hello to you and we're like two people running around a little tiny thing,
moderately upset,
slaying goatmen. There was a post on Reddit like when a game came out, it was like, why is no one saying hello anymore? Everyone was saying hello at launch, and now I say hello to people and no one's saying hello anymore. That's very upsetting.
Yeah,
I was like, I'm with you, Reddit person. I was like, yeah, see, it takes a second.
It's because they're like, I'm sorry, but the live service elements of this are superfluous. So I'm not going to engage with someone.
And it's monetized out the wazoo, just like Call of Duty. It's a $70 game with a paid battle pass and a store offering cosmetic bundles anywhere from $10 or $8 to $25, $30, and $40, which is even more silly because of how far away your camera is from the character. I want to say it's even sillier than Call of Duty, because Call of Duty is a first-person game, so you'll never see anything but your hands. But somehow it's even sillier here because you're just so far away that you're. Well,
at least other people can see you in Call of Duty.
That's the thing.
Right?
Like obviously,
Wearing
that's the
your
thing.
Special hat or whatever.
But it's the most like we need a AAA game now, and then you bolt all these things around it. And it's unnecessary. A lot of it. It's sometimes
it
gross.
Kind of feels like you're neither one thing or the other. It's like, you know how Amazon Prime Video now has adverts on the fucking, and it's like I sat down to watch an episode of The Expanse last night, and there was an advert for some fucking holiday company, and I'm like, what is going on here? And it's like, oh no, nothing's sustainable anymore. It's all fucked. So yeah, it's like. But you expect, like, if you're paying directly for television, you expect it to not have ads, but that's still not. It's not enough. We'd all have to be paying like £70 a month for this stuff. So,
we're
like,
slowly losing. I think we're not losing. We're slowly getting rid of what a standard is. Where it used to be like, oh, you would pay for Netflix and you get all this stuff, and then they were like, actually, we're going to take away some of this stuff. And you're like, I guess it's fine because I still have The Office or whatever. And then actually, there's no Office anymore because there's another thing to Netflix that wants The Office. And then you're like, okay, I still have, Daredevil and whatever. It's like, actually, this is going to be on Disney Plus now. Sorry. Also, your subscription has gone up $3. It's like slowly, whereas like the same with Amazon Prime. It's like, oh, you get Amazon Music, you get Amazon Prime delivery, and you get Amazon Video, blah, 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 for this low price. And you're like, this is a no-brainer. I'm already buying everything from Amazon. And you're like, well, you still get Amazon Prime Video, but we're gonna put some ads.
Now like Amazon Music is useless unless you.
And then Amazon Music has obviously been useless for a while. So it's the same thing. Where it's like Diablo, you'd think you'd look at like Diablo 2, Diablo 3, and a bunch of the other games in the genre. You're like, oh, this is a lot of content, and I only paid once for it. I would love to pay more for this in the form of expansion if you're not making enough of them. Whereas this game wants you to pay a lot more for a lot less, and then that's the standard. Like, it's a $70 game, monetized in 3 different ways, and it's like, it's sometimes it's just gross.
Would you prefer a world?
Because we're kind of in the find out period of all of this sort of stuff. That it's like with Uber and all of the tech apps and the disruptor kind of element of it, that it undercuts everything else by being cheaper based on venture capital and not making any money. Yes. And then and that's the reason why Netflix is kind of going up and up and up and up, isn't it? Because they spent so much on original content and didn't make money for forever and ever and ever. And then that initial wave of stuff is starting to run out, and it feels like that within the Embracer Group stuff and all this sort of stuff, that we're kind of in the money's running out kind of stage where things are trying to make money, like you say. And maybe I'll touch on that later.
I really like. Would you prefer a world where you have to give Blizzard money to get into your house, or Jeff Bezos? I'm certain that within 30 years, Amazon's just going to be like the government.
That's what happens in Starfield, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's already when you can choose the player-owned house as your perk at the start of the game. It's pay as you enter. I don't know if everybody else has played that part of Starfield, but you can choose to have a house, but you own a mortgage on it. It's just like pay as you enter your own house.
That's
like you want to come home after a night on
this is the
town.
Future that Todd wants.
500 quid. Yeah, and they think it's great. It's not critical of that at all.
No,
Starfield is like, hey, it's the future, and it great. We got spaceships and that, and it's like fucking horrid. Anyway, right, let's move on from Diablo. Right, I'm gonna make you go last, James. Okay, if that's okay, Rebecca.
I would like to talk about a little bit about like Hoyoverse games in general to start with before I kind of get into my pick, because I unironically do enjoy Hoyoverse games. And I'm glad James is here, because it's James's fault that I unironically love Hoyoverse games, because about 3 years ago, James, you were like, oh, can you write me some guides on Genshin Impact, please? And I was like, well, I don't really like this sort of thing. I don't like games as a service games, but it's my job. I'll write some. And it turned out it was quite good. So I kept playing that, and I also now play Honkai Star Rail, which came out last year. Honkai Star Rail is actually the game I prefer of the two, I would say, but 2 reasons I didn't pick it for this. One is that I genuinely think it's a good game. Like, it is genuinely very enjoyable. Honestly, probably my joint game of the year last year, along with Baldur's Gate 3. It's probably got less of a life to it, but in terms of how much I enjoyed it, like moment to moment throughout playing it last year, like very, very good game. Second thing, I don't think the live service elements are actually doing anything for me in Star Rail. Like, they're not detracting from my enjoyment quite, but I would enjoy it. In fact, I play it the way Sharif plays Diablo 4, in that I kind of pick it up when there's new content and I play it for as long as like that bit of new content lasts, and then I kind of dip out until there's more new content to play. I just ignore the kind of more live servicey elements of it, except when I have to do something like character level grinding or whatever. But yeah, Honkai Star Rail, in my opinion, a better game, but Genshin Impact is definitely the game, as instructed to pick, that I love in spite of itself, that I really enjoy, and I'm aware of its flaws as a live service game. But I still keep going back to it just over time, again and again. And I think also the thing with Genshin, and the reason that I wanted to talk about it in this subject in particular, is because, as I say, Honkai Star Rail, if that had been released kind of like something like Mass Effect, and it had been like a base game with a smaller group of core characters that you were, you know, the main characters, there are main characters in Star Rail. So how I play it is I just have and build the main characters and play through story. And when there's a new story, like, and, you know, in the same way that Mass Effect did, like, significant DLC that concluded the story, but it didn't sort of bloat and go forever. And that's why I think Star Rail probably won't have such long legs, because eventually it'll get so bloated that you'll like basically barely interact with the actual point of the game. And that's probably when I'll drop off. But with Genshin, the way it's formulated is as this sort of like road trip epic. And so they keep adding, like, every few months, there'll be like a new area of the map, like a pretty significant area of the map. Every year they do a big update, which hugely expands the map. And there's also the fact that there's currently, I think it's 76 or 77 playable characters in Genshin.
Oh, Jesus.
But the thing is, because of the way it's being released, because the new characters being released every 6 weeks or so, they're all fully voice acted. They are, you know, like fully scripted, huge backstories. And I can't think of a single other game that has 100 odd playable characters who are that deep and all equally important to the plot and have that much significance. And so while I don't think that the way Hoyoverse monetized games justifies the use of a gacha, because I don't think that there's ever a need to monetize through loot boxes. I think there's always a more, you know, a slightly more ethical alternative, even though, you know, it's all a bit of a mess at the moment, as we've been saying already. I do think that it kind of justifies at least the update model in Genshin, because I don't think that you could drip feed that content over time and have it be like as consistently enjoyable and good. And like the world is fun to explore, the characters are fun to have around and fun to get to know. And yeah, I think that it is this kind of, yes, live service games are a bit cursed, but I think that Genshin Impact is making the best use of some of the slightly less inherently cursed things about live service to make a really genuinely enjoyable game, as evidenced by the fact that I keep going back to it and keep going back to it. I know that I'm about 150 hours into Star Rail by now. I've not tracked my playtime on Genshin. I know it must be more because it's just been around longer. I don't really want to know.
Yeah.
And like, it's not a perfect game. There is a lot, even beyond the whole, you know, gacha system, which is not great. There is stuff in that game that I genuinely will rage against, and I will like leave it for 2 months because I'm so angry, but I keep coming back because exploring that world and meeting those characters is so enjoyable. And there's always, you know, if you do rage quit for 2 months, you come back and like there's a new character to meet, there's a new island to explore. And it's just, you know, that is the sort of thing I play games for, because I don't like online multiplayer. No. Genshin and Star Rail are not multiplayer largely. You know, they are single player, like instance games that you can kind of explore at your own pace. And yeah, you come back, nothing bad's happened. You maybe lost a few time limited events, whatever. But yeah, it is oddly enjoyable, even though I'm constantly aware that it's a little bit like, probably could be spending my time on something with a bit more prestige to it. Yeah. So yeah. Definitely Genshin Impact for this one. It's got to be.
Well, that's the thing with the Hoyoverse games, isn't it? Like they have almost like they've got incredible production values. Like they've got like they feel like AAA. Like they feel good to play. Like Genshin Impact's got like it's got that Zelda traversal stuff, and like it's really difficult to sort of. It's not like a lot of live service games. You're like, this is like, on a fundamental level is crap, but it's basically a casino.
Yeah, they're a bit shit. That's what you're trying to say.
Yeah,
but
like Genshin doesn't feel like that. You know, Genshin feels like a game that you could justifiably pay 70 quid for.
And yeah, exactly. And I would if I could. And if I could just pay 70 quid for Star Rail and then buy add-ons, I would. But like, as I say with Genshin, the fact is I don't think they could give that out for 70 quid plus a 25 quid DLC a year. You know, at least it's making the best use of kind of a bad trend, I guess is my point.
At least a lot of that kind of gacha money is going to voice actors, probably keeping several of them like employed long term. That's
true. I mean, it's like a lot of it goes into the music, because the music is so good. And like, yeah, I think I saw something last year about how Genshin is currently the most expensive game. And I thought, oh, they mean to play if you want to like buy everything. But they actually meant in terms of production values, Really? It's the most expensive. They spend most on it, I think, per year at the moment. And like, that makes sense to me, honestly. And like, again, gacha, dodgy. I will never not say loot box is bad, but at the same time, it is kind of good to see that money goes back into the production, I guess.
Yeah.
So, you know, and like the music is just like so good. I listen to the soundtracks all the time. It's just nice. It feels nice to play, and it's kind of a nice world to inhabit. And try not to don't spend money on it would always be my advice. I've never spent any money on either of these games. I hasten to say, you can totally play it without spending money. Let someone else whale it. You know, you
were talking about ethical ways to do things earlier, and I think if you're going to make a live service game, the properly ethical way to do it is to do it where you can play it without handing over money, where for a lot of them it's just not really viable.
Indeed. So, I think there's that too. I think I would have bounced off these games if there was like no way to play without paying money, because in fact I've reached a point like fairly early on with Genshin where I was like, I would pay some money for this thing, and then I was like, you can't pay for this. You can't pay for like level skips or character materials. Like that's one of the weird things about these games is they're like, no, you're gonna grind for this. You're absolutely gonna sit and play for 20 hours if you want to level up this character, and like that's the only choice. And then they'll say, but you know, £2,000 to guarantee this character today, and I'm like, I don't really care enough to pay £2,000 to do that today. Yeah. But what I would like would be to give you a tenner and you give me like a level skip, and they're like, no. So I just don't. I'm like, okay, fair enough. We're in agreement. I'm not giving you any money, which is actually fine.
Yeah.
It's always the same thing. Like sometimes I look at Diablo and I'm like, I don't want level skips in Diablo, but sometimes I look at the bundle prices and I'm like, this is like, I would pay you $5, maybe upwards of $10. $10, but not 40, right? Not 25.
Yeah.
Like just and I understand they have their
just
calculations.
Buy a fucking game for that. I can go do something else for that.
Like they're absolutely not microtransactions, right? Like it's this is the thing that I will never understand. But every time I mention this, someone says the evidence suggests that by making them expensive, you make them more valuable and you make them coveted. And so even though you sell fewer instances of them to players, that still makes more money than somehow devaluing them by making them accessible to a larger group of players, because some people will just not spend money at all, but the people who spend money or who are willing to spend money will go to the prices that we want. And I just feel I want someone to challenge that, but I'm not a researcher. But like my example is always like when I go to sometimes you go to a restaurant or even like a fast food thing, and it's like, hey, add 5 and get a larger larger fries and a larger drink, right? Or like it's always like add the tiny fraction of your meal, the total price of the meal, and then get this bigger thing. And it's always enticing, right? It's never like.
Have you noticed that you always go for a food metaphor?
Look, man.
Are you like a hungry guy?
I mean, it works. So we've all got to eat, right? So we all kind of understand.
Like there was
comparison.
I'm a man who loves fast food. You can tell by looking at me, but like, it's not a criticism. I just love it. Sharif's always in there.
We're all games journalists, so we definitely all eat.
I'm also very, I'm in a new country recently, so I'm like very conscious of how things work in terms of like the prices of food or whatever around that stuff. So I'm like, there are things that I pay attention to now that I didn't before.
There's a recent video where at some point Sharif's just like, it's like, when you go to a Brazilian barbecue place, and I'm like, what? Where's this coming from?
It's personal. And actually that place has like an option of like, I think it's $250 for like an everything, and it's like $300 for prime cuts and unlimited drinks. So it's like, okay, just pay the extra $50, right? Like that's what I mean. But if you come and tell me, well, prime cuts and unlimited drinks for $200, I'd be like, no, I'm good. For $150, no, I'm good. This is the same thing for these games. It's like you paid $70, and you paid $10 for the battle pass, and then you want to pay $25 for one skin for one character. I'd be like, no, I don't.
Yeah,
but if you say weird. Like, here's $20 for all characters, maybe they're not. That's what I mean. Like, it never makes sense to me. Like, the prices are just they may as well be $100. I don't care.
It is a weird way of trying to have it both ways, to my way of looking at it. Because, I mean, like, Hoyoverse games are free to play, but they still have a paid battle pass and then the gacha elements. And I feel like that's too much. I'm like, pick one. So having that on a $70 base game is, like, just just seems
cheeky,
like
if anything.
Exactly. It's just a piss take. Are we allowed to swear on the show now?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. It's like Tom's not even here. James is standing in for Tom.
I think something that's also really interesting about the Genshin Impact in particular, because it was the first one, this big, like, huge cataclysmic kind of shift in the landscape of games as a service. That
certainly like Western attitudes towards gacha games as well.
Exactly.
I mean, it's not Hoyoverse's first game, but it's the first one to really crack Western markets.
Exactly. And I think that it has a really interesting position as like a Chinese cultural project in that point, that it is this very Japanese styled sort of Zelda-esque, but with the concept of like, what if Xenoblade Chronicles never finished sort of thing. But it's very uniquely Chinese, particularly in the regions and in the characters. And there is a lot of Chinese cultural history and mythology folded into all of that. And it is a very uniquely Chinese game. And it obviously has ties to this huge monolithic corporation behind it, so much money put into it. And I think that's a really interesting dynamic between it being free to play, it being pushed so much. It has this kind of gacha thing. It's inviting you to play. It's inviting you to enjoy all of these characters, to explore all of these worlds within a very uniquely Chinese setting. And I think that I don't have my thoughts kind of fully formed on that, but particularly when I was first playing it, it was a very interesting, like I say, it was a very interesting dynamic to have that Chinese cultural aspect of it, have it almost artificially pushed out by this big Chinese company by it being free to play. And I think that's something to kind of consider when you're thinking about it, when you're playing it.
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't want to sort of go into it in full detail because I have lots of semi-formed opinions on, you know, the background behind Hoyoverse as a company. And, you know, like it is so interesting, right? Because they started out, 12 years ago as like 3 students in a bedsit, and now they are undeniably a massive corporation. And kind of like the lack of the trying to work out how that snowballed in such a relatively short time is in itself. Like you know, I do know the podcast about indie games, and so I think about this a lot. Like, how do you?
It's the American dream, isn't it? Except now it can only happen in China.
Exactly. And you know, the fact that as well, it's like, the way it's monetized is very, like, it feels weird to a lot of like Anglophone and Western players, but it's actually way more of a comfortable monetization model in like China and Japan and Korea and like other parts of Asia. It's a little bit more acceptable, and actually like that starts you looking at things like the cost of a console exclusive with all its DLC, with its paid battle pass, and like you start to look at it all in a bit of like, is all game monetization that's not just recouping, like 3 indie devs recouping their input, actually quite predatory? And I don't have any answers to that. I just think about it a lot. So
it makes sense as well if you think about how it comes from like a culture in Asia that they don't have here. Where like we used to have arcades here, but in like, you know, I know in Japan they still have arcades. It's still a massive part of the culture. People have like really small apartments in cities. They go outside for this, like that kind of like cafe culture. You go outside to eat. You go outside to play video games. And like there are people like in arcades paying, you know, in 500 yen coins for time in an MMO where they've got a consistent character and stuff. And it's like, you know, it's just it's I think it's quite normal to pay for these things kind of piecemeal. Whereas like here we don't do things quite like that. So
I want to know, like, Rebecca, does it, because for me, I feel like I look at Genshin specifically, or I guess, and I guess to a lesser extent, Sariel. It scares me a bit because I feel like they have cracked the code by making a very much a Western RPG. With the production values that you'd expect from a game like Assassin's Creed, but with the monetization of a free-to-play mobile game. And I feel like Ubisoft is looking at that and EA is looking at that, and I feel like they're dying to make one of those. Like, if Ubisoft could make an Assassin's Creed game that is free-to-play or has like a very low barrier of entry and is monetized in that way, and they already have the pipeline of production value.
They've kind of tried that
and quality,
like identity on mobile.
You know what I mean? Like it's and there was a report recently about Tencent trying to make a gacha Elden Ring on mobile, which to me is basically we're trying to make a Hoyoverse game that is Elden Ring. like I just look at that and I feel like if someone else figures this out, I feel like the quote unquote AAA games that we're used to, as bloated as they are today and overly monetized, maybe even something that we look back on fondly as like the good old days where you could buy an Assassin's Creed for $70 and play it for a year. Do you consider that like do you consider like, because I feel like that scares me when I look at it. Like I hope kind of no one cracks that code.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's a few factors go into that. You know, I think that Koei has always monetized their games this way, so they've had the time to get good at it, and I think we've seen it before. Like another company is like, we could probably do one of those, and it just dies. And I think that's the thing, as well as it's you risk always oversaturating the market as well, and I think that's probably going to be the death of it's the death of so many trends in gaming. It probably will be the death of games like Genshin and Star Rail eventually. Is that, I mean, even Hoyoverse is doing it to itself right now. They've got Tears of Themis, they've got Honkai Impact the Third, they've got Genshin Impact, Honkai Star Rail, and soon Zenless Zone Zero. So that's gonna be like 5 games just from their company that are readily available to most people. And like already the sort of previews are coming back, because like when I played Honkai Star Rail for the first time, I was like, there's no way they're gonna, like, the Genshin formula was like lightning in a bottle. They're not going to do it again. And it's not the same, but it was also a really good game. But Zenless Zone Zero, I already seen previews that like, it's all right, but coming on the back of the last 2 games, it's not like got as good a hook. And they're cannibalizing their own audience at this point. So if anyone else gets in on it, I think what you're going to see is basically just the way that we've seen with so many, with like zombies modes and with, you know, like battle royales, and the bottom falls out of things after 5 years. And then you've got people going, we've just come out with our, you know, new Genshin style open world gacha game. And everyone's like, we were over those 2 years ago. What are you on about?
Live service. That's live service now, basically. Like
exactly.
Hey, we've got this live service game, but Harley Quinn's in it.
Yeah, like there will surely
there will
be
guys?
surely there will be imitators, and surely it will kind of suck, but it will be part of another trend that then gets rolled over. In my opinion, I mean, you know,
for a Western game studio to do it though, they would have to invent a play mechanic that isn't just press triangle to talk to the man. So I don't think we're quite there. You do spend a lot
of time in these games pressing triangle. Like sometimes I'll just be sat there and I'll be like, I have been in this. Not even a cutscene, just like little visual novel section for about an hour and a half. And it's just a weird balance. Like I love visual novels, so I'm fine. But I think to sell that, as you say,
especially like trying to sell that game to like young people as well. Nobody got the patience for that. You know, young people don't have the patience to read.
Yeah.
I've just realised we've got 7 minutes to get Bill Cliff's pick out. So
sorry.
It's all right. Bill Cliff's just going to have to do it in double quick time. James, what is your pick? What is your games as a service game that you like despite itself?
Well, I'm not going to beat around the bush because it is the correct answer. And that's really lucky that I've not got enough time to really sell it, because I like this game for 2 key reasons, and like absolutely really, really luckily they line up quite nicely with both Shree's pick and Rebecca's pick. And I won't beat around the bush anymore. I did actually pick Destiny 2. Because
no way! Oh my god!
Because I think
Dom was originally going to be in this, and he picked it as well.
Ultimate games as a service game, as I say, for a couple of key reasons. For the first one, and I picked Destiny 2 over the original Destiny because, but there is a really interesting through thread there that when I was sort of in my kind of late teens and getting sort of really pretentiously into games and all of that sort of stuff, the elevator pitch, the pie in the sky theory behind the original Destiny, the whole 10-year plan that you get with crypto scams and World of Warcraft and all of this stuff, that it's going to be that you're going to get on the ground floor of this incredible experience, and it's going to be a new world that you can habit and you can live in, and all of that stuff. And I think that we spoke about Diablo 4 not being designed as a live service game, but Destiny and Destiny 2 within that ecosystem has always been designed to be this all-encompassing, this living, breathing world that you can inhabit, that you can become your guardian in. And I've always found that really, really evocative. I've always found myself really drawn to that. And I think that the other aspect that I really enjoy about Destiny is that the uniquely or really solidly Bungie core loop of the incredible first-person shooting is always there, and that is a key aspect that Bungie as a studio has always had at the center of Destiny, and it does incredibly well and almost better than anybody else. And I think that is an interesting comparison to make with the Hoyoverse games, which are, despite their quality, in a lot of ways quite derivative. The Genshin Impact was kind of this Zelda-alike, and then has sort of spiraled out into kind of basically every RPG or JRPG ever. And then we talk about Honkai Star Rail as being kind of a Fire Emblem turn-based sort of thing. It's they're both quite derivative in that aspect. And I think that Destiny 2, for all of its expansions and strangeness of kind of taking out content sometimes, it is always this absolutely rock solid shooter that is an incredible campaign. As Sharif said, you're always coming back to play this Bungie first-person shooter campaign. And that is always the rock solid foundation that this game has. And whatever the fiction that they layer on top of that, which I also find really evocative. I really love that Space Guardian thing, that space opera sci-fi that's also underpinned by really great performances by Lance Reddick, by Nathan Fillion, these big name actors from the kind of AAA space that they bring in all the time, creates this really polished and really exciting and really great game that you can come back to, that you can play forever. And another aspect of it I think is quite underrated is the PvP. I always really like the PvP, even though it does now and again kind of get blown out of the water when they fudge up a little bit of an overpowered weapon or stuff, but that happens in pretty much every PvP game. It has that Halo hook of spamming people with force grenades and all of that stuff, whacking people with melee. It has all of these uniquely or stereotypically or characteristically Bungie elements that you associate specifically with that studio, while having this kind of forever through thread that is always been part of the game and is specifically designed to prop up this really interesting, really aesthetically pleasing, really, for want of a better word, iconic world that they've built. You look at even the merch and the hoodies and the plushies and all of that stuff, and you think, the iconography of all these different factions and all of the classes and all of that sort of stuff, it's really, really good. And I just think it's the ultimate games as a service game because it was designed from the ground up to be like that. It has a really solid gameplay core loop that is uniquely tied to the actual studio, that is innovative and good on its own account, while also having a really strong, alluring, interesting aesthetic with all of these AAA aspects of big name actors, great performances, and it just smushes it all into one. And even if you're paying a frankly ridiculous amount of money for each new expansion, it is at least a cohesive package, even if it is confusing sometimes. Full stop.
But my question to you, James, is: are you playing it as a live service game? Like, do you go back to it for the weeklies and dailies, and how often are you playing Destiny 2? Really? So
I find it actually it's very interesting. You reminded me then that you said at the start with your pick for Diablo that you don't that you actually do play as live service, and that's quite interesting because the most recent Diablo game that I played was Diablo Immortal on mobile, and that is obviously super predatory. Kind of, you have to play for all of the artifacts and the boosters to get your build right or whatever. I didn't play any of that. I just played the campaign of Diablo Immortal, and it was pretty good. I hadn't played a Diablo game for ages and ages, and then Diablo Immortal came around, and I actually really enjoyed just playing it as a campaign without any of the MMO or the live service stuff tacked on. But with Destiny specifically, once I've done the campaign, I always find myself really drawn to the strike playlists, just doing random ones, where you can kind of just go through the same raids with random people, and you could just get chucked in. It's like you said with being a great podcast game, you can just switch off. Yeah. You've played all this stuff before, but it has that really rock solid core loop of really engaging shooting. So even if you are just shooting the same 3 alien blokes over and over again and watching the numbers go up, shooting the numbers out of those men, bro, it is just still serotonin tickling. It is that perfect rock solid thing that I think I probably used to get that fix from Call of Duty, that it has that twitch intense kind of shooter aspect to it. And I think that the gear stuff, am I actually interested in that grind? Yeah, because it all looks really cool. The aesthetic design of all of the different loot pieces and legendaries and exotics, I really like all of that stuff. So yeah, I am actually interested in the live service stuff.
Just a couple of things I want to say. Sorry, I know we're running over, but like, first, I do want to counter for Hoyoverse is that you say that it's fairly derivative, and it is, but also, you know, when you sort of talk about Destiny and Halo, like everything comes from a tradition. So, you know, and like, it's fair to say this to you because this is your fault that I'm this into Halo. So anything that I say is fair. Yeah. But the second point I want to make is just, it sounds like you don't like this game in spite of itself. It sounds like you like this game, James.
So 2 good points.
Yeah, I was going to say that. I was going to point that out.
So two good points. The first one is that like Bungie made Halo. For a start.
Yeah, that's fair.
Can you be derivative of yourself?
Well, I mean, I accuse Hoyo of being derivative of themselves in my section, so I think that like I've at least set precedent for it.
Yeah, but they are also derivative of Nintendo. And,
yeah, okay, that's a fair point.
And that is the kind of key. That's the key space that they're trying to inhabit. They're trying to do the Power World thing, really, but in a bigger thing. They're trying to do what Nintendo don't, aren't they? So
nice. Partially withdrawn, but I still maintain there are other space opera shooters. It's not just Bungie.
Yeah, but it has a very unique aesthetic that is I think unique to Destiny. Second, do I like it in spite of itself? Definitely, because
you have to backtrack now. You have to
walk.
No,
I don't have to backtrack because I don't think So I remember when Destiny 2 first came out, and I was super into it, playing it hours and hours for every night. And then I brushed up against the first time that it was the first expansion. And I wasn't working in the industry at the time. I was a bit younger and all of that sort of stuff. And I was extremely upset that it was like, you've been playing and enjoying this game that you've paid full price for. How about another 40 quid, please? So I am since it's come free to play, I sit a lot more comfortably with that idea that you're coming in at the ground floor, and particularly that they often give away the base and old expansions free, or included, well, not free, included with PS Plus, included with stuff. It is now, I think that I went off it for a good few years because of that aggressive expansion monetization, that it really felt like it was coming out cap in hand really, really quickly. It was particularly when it was at that premium price point. But now that the base game's free to play, that you're often getting the previous expansions included with all the stuff. There's a humble bundle out at the moment where you can get all of the stuff for 15 quid in preparation for last night.
Yeah.
So in spite of itself, I think for me, I've arrived at a place where they seem to have become we're always talking in kind of modern life about how we're still figuring stuff out. We're still figuring out the language for stuff. We're still figuring out how to interact with these kind of new concepts. And I feel that Destiny 2 is one of those things where it feels a little bit horse armory, where they said like, oh, we literally did not know how much to charge for horse armor. It feels like Destiny 2 has come to a place where it's more comfortable with what it knows that it can promise, what it can get, what it can ask from you. And I think that I'm back on board now because of that.
That makes sense.
Fair
All
enough.
right.
Just gotta kick my tires. I think you're going to win, so I have to really deconstruct your argument.
It's never a given.
I've got to pick something now, and
Do.
I'm really I can't pick Diablo 4 because
What?
It's shite, isn't it, Sharif?
But it is not. It is not.
I think it's probably a fun game,
lot.
but it's not a fun live service game, is it?
If you enjoyed, because of that's the thing. Like you enjoy it because of all the live service element, in spite of the live service elements. That's the idea.
I
think if
suppose,
you enjoyed,
how are we going to judge this, right? So it's got to be a really good base game, where the live service elements are annoying, but ultimately
superficial. Like that's the point.
Superficial and annoying, but ultimately you still the base game is good enough that you're still on board, right? So I suppose in that criteria, what is the best base game? Is really different. Now they're all really good, like really base games. Like Diablo has this massive heritage, and it's always been like a real kind of staple of the ARPG genre. But I'm just not that into it, so I'm not going to pick it. Sure, right? Because your guy's too wee, the camera's too far back, and I don't like it.
You can zoom in. You can zoom in. Jim. If that's your problem. In fact, the number one complaint that people have is that the camera is way too zoomed in compared to previous games. So
yeah, you see,
happy about that.
Diablo players are all mad, right? So for me, it comes down to like, what is the better game? When you get down to brass tacks, what is the better game between Destiny 2 and Genshin Impact? And I think, right? I think people are might actually shout at me for this.
They're going to shout either way. That's like a flame bait question.
I think on balance, the game I'm a lot more interested in, given that they both got really interesting worlds, but one of them, you interact with that world in more ways than pumping lead into people, and that would be Genshin Impact.
Have you ever played Genshin Impact? I really didn't think
that was where that was going.
You just...
Yeah, I played Genshin Impact. I played it for a bit. You can glide around, and I know you get that bike in Destiny. Do you still get the bike in Destiny 2?
You still get the spanner.
You still get the bike.
Yeah.
Oh, fucking hell. No, I'm still going to go with Genshin Impact because, like...
Don't take it back, James. That's not fair.
I'm still going to go with the Genshin Impact because I just find as well that Destiny's general sort of lore and things... I see what you're saying, James, about them being like amazing space operas and stuff, but they're fucking baffling, aren't they?
But the wizard came from the moon.
Yeah, exactly.
They're overbearing, ostentatious, and way too up their own ass.
I once did a thing about, and I got a lot of stick for it at the time, but it was years ago. But it basically said that Destiny's story is like, it feels like an alien culture trying to
communicate through.
Yeah, trying to write what looks like a story, but it's like how I don't know,
like an AI trying to pass.
Yeah, like an AI trying to invent a space opera, and it's like, from a distance, it's sort of this has all, but then you get into the nitty gritty of it, and it's just baffling nonsense, and it doesn't. So on that basis, I think Genshin Impact is the slightly better game. So Rebecca wins.
Nice.
I think that's your third win, isn't it, Rebecca?
My third win. Yeah. And you know what? I was as randomly, oddly invested in winning this as I am in Genshin. So it feels really appropriate. Like, I'm usually not bothered whether I win, but I've got a really good argument this time. I really hope I win this one, which just, I think, says a lot about my relationship to these games. Yeah. So
Bill Clip's raging. Bill Clip's absolutely raging, but he is standing in for Tom today.
So that's his job, really.
Yeah, fulfilling the role really, really.
Not enough face bombs on a Saturday.
All right, well, it's time to listen to that fucking.
Yay!
Oh. I think I hate it slightly more every time I hear it. Right. Okay. My pick. So yeah, I get a pick now, and this will be what is the extended portion of the podcast. I like how we've massively overrun time-wise on this particular episode of the podcast, because, you know, the real problem I think fundamentally people have with live service games is they're just so fucking bloated. Generally,
it's very self-demonstrating, isn't it? This whole episode.
So it's very meta. We've done it deliberately. Right. So I don't know if people are going to argue with me about whether or not this counts, but the one I've gone for is Assassin's Creed Valhalla, which has live service elements. It's a base game that it's a full price base game, or at least it was. You can get it for very cheap now. It had season pass. It has regular expansions. It has seasonal content. It has like a very sort of mild, kind of slightly not multiplayer, but like asynchronous multiplayer elements where, like, if another player has died doing like a camp, their body will show up in the world, and you'll get like a dynamic quest where you can avenge them for like extra kind of gold and XP and stuff. And it's absolutely rammed with cosmetic DLC and add-on weapons and stuff like that you can pay real money for, time skips, things that unlock like things on the map or whatever, that you can plow a lot of extra money into this game to sort of, reduce the amount of grinding you have to do to get certain things. So I don't think it's not, certainly not what people think of when they think of a game as a service or think of a live service game, but it does have live service elements, and they're fucking terrible. And the game is it's incredibly bloated. But there is the core Assassin's Creed experience, and it happens to be set in probably my favorite period of history, which is that kind of post-Roman, like basically a European kind of post-apocalypse where like civilization actually collapsed. And and I think it's fascinating. You've got all these Roman ruins everywhere, and these are people who are living in the shadow of a really highly advanced civilization that they just must have found akin to godhood, right? Imagine like being someone who lives in a mud hut and looking up at a fucking aqueduct and going, who the fuck built that? What is it even for? So like it's one of my favorite periods in history. And I love Assassin's Creed. I'm very invested in the meta-narrative. I love playing Assassin's Creed.
You can't dunk on Destiny's lore and then say, I'm very invested in the Assassin's Creed meta-narrative.
Assassin's Creed's lore is way better than Destiny's fucking lore. Assassin's Creed lore actually makes sense.
No.
There's nothing baffling about Assassin's Creed lore. There's nothing baffling about Assassin's Creed lore. What are you on about?
Nonsense about the Apple or like the progenitor race or whatever the hell.
Can you explain to me where Desmond is at this point in time? Jim, if Assassin's Creed lore isn't baffling, what's Desmond up to now?
He's just fucking dead.
No, he isn't.
Yeah, he is.
Oh God.
Or his consciousness ended up in the. Listen, right? I'm not going to get into it, right? But
no,
for all intents and purposes, he died saving the world from the 2012 solar flare apocalypse that had been prophesied for the entire. I'm not. Sorry.
No, sorry. I'm just doing a bit. But like, as someone who's playing Assassin's Creed Valhalla at the moment and has skipped a lot of the middle games, I'm just like, why is the Aurora Borealis over my house in like Virginia or wherever it is when I'm in the present day sections? If Desmond saved the world, I'm genuinely asking because I'm confused.
No, Assassin's Creed. This is
I
me
don't
picking
know the
apart.
answer to that.
This is me picking apart your pick, Jim. Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and really the Assassin's Creed games since Origins, where they have sort of flirted with live service without really committing. That's cowardly. They're cowards. They don't want to commit fully to a live service game. They're just bolting on elements to it. And so for you to call this like a live service game is like akin to me. I'm gonna use another food analogy because this is the thing that comes to my mind right now. This is akin to me calling a pizza healthy food because it has some tomatoes on it and some basil. That's not it. That's not it. I can't, you can't just get a bucket of fried chicken and say, well, it has protein. Yes, it has protein, but it has like, what, 6,000 grams of sodium and
it has
double that in fat?
It has all the things that you described about Diablo being a live service.
No, but Diablo, no. See, the ratio from protein to fat is much higher in favor of protein in Diablo. Whereas Assassin's Creed is just a lot of fat and a lot of bloat, and then there's some protein in there, which is the history stuff that you care
all
about.
All the live service elements that you described in Diablo 4 are in Assassin's Creed Valhalla to some degree. Every single one.
Does it have seasons? It doesn't have competitive seasons like Diablo.
Can you
call
it
have competitive seasons, but it's got seasonal like.
Can you do dungeons with a mate for glyphs and stuff?
And it's got like Easter and Christmas and stuff, but which introduce sort of things where you can compete in challenges to get certain items, and if you don't get the item, then like you've lost your chance to do it. And,
I guess the thing for me would be that I think all of these games like Genshin and Diablo 4 and Destiny 2, they're live service because there's going to come a day when the servers go down and you can't play them anymore. I think if you own Assassin's Creed Valhalla, you'll still be able to play the core game of Assassin's Creed Valhalla once those live service elements end. And for me, like, I do agree with everything you're saying, Jim, except for the classification of this necessarily as a live service game. Because, trust me, I load it up. At the moment, I'm playing Assassin's Creed Valhalla again for guides. I load it up and there's literally a 5-minute loading screen where it checks to see if it's got any new content on the Ubisoft store. Like, it's very clear that it's doing a lot of that. But the thing that I find interesting is, like, Sharif, what you were saying earlier about, companies like Ubisoft trying to make a gacha style game. I sort of feel like this is the closest that we're likely to get, because I think that someone like Ubisoft, who get a lot of accolades and a lot of recognition for the games that they make, they don't want to go further over that line because they know that, like, Hoyoverse games can be the biggest on earth, and yet they get maybe one nomination at every game award, and it's always the mobile category, and they don't always win. And so I wonder if this is where you're going to see that kind of line being drawn for companies like Ubisoft.
Also, like, Ubisoft have built up an audience of people who love single player, sort of narrative-driven experiences, and I think if Assassin's Creed ever went full on live service, that there would be
people would riot.
People burn down Paris for less, So like, Anyway, I think we better leave it there because.
Can I just say one last thing? Because I always regret that I didn't write this review at the time, because I've played well over 100 hours of Valhalla, and it is probably one of the worst Assassin's Creed games, just because it is so endless. And there are some good bits. The Halloween bit in Shropshire is really good. The some of the bits with like Ceolwulf and the political intrigue in the mid game is quite nice. But it is absolutely exemplary of what I said about there are no play mechanics in that game other than press triangle to talk to the man. The combat is so two-buttoned, just dodge and hit. And all of the weapons are exactly the same. And I think that the Ragnarok DLC, the main DLC of that game, is one of the worst games that I've played. Like, genuinely, as a kind of standalone thing, it was just so directionless, and directionless is the only word that I can think of. And I probably would have given it 1 star if I'd actually reviewed it at the time.
I really I can't stand the Assassin's Creed DLC that's just like, oh, none of this actually matters because this is just an animus thing, but go and knock yourself out in this. And it's like, if it doesn't matter in the context of Assassin's Creed, why should I give a fuck about it? It's like that alternate universe George Washington shit they did with the third one. It's like, I don't care. This is like, this means nothing. This is just a guy in a game playing a game. Anyway,
so that's to say, Jim, that your pick is terrible on just quality grounds, as well as everything else.
The rest of it.
But I do like Valhalla despite itself, because it's it's like the most 7 out of 10 Assassin's Creed they've ever done. But I love it because it's Assassin's Creed.
That's such a mood.
Yeah.
Seriously. Someone who's putting so many hours into this for guides at the moment, it's such a mood.
So yeah, thank you for sticking with it if you've made it this far, and we will be back next week with another topic that we've not decided yet. So I don't even know why I'm attempting to tease it, but this podcast was brought to you by the idea that Suicide Squad has to be the nadir of live service games, and surely this is like the bottom, rock bottom. But it's not, is it, Sharif? Because you think it's going to get worse before it gets better. We've done a video on that on the channel quite recently. If you want to check out our other weekly show, which is the Shiitake Show, I'm not going to explain that.
We're pretty close, though. We're pretty close. It might be the close.
I think we're getting to a point where live service games are no longer going to be money spinners because everyone is that sick of them. A bit like Souls-likes are probably hitting that, aren't they?
No. There aren't nearly enough of them to do that.
Yeah, but they're all going fucking open world now and getting easy modes and stuff because folk are sick of it. You can't grow an audience. You can't grow an audience on the idea that these games are fucking horrible to play. We're not getting into it.
No, the thing about Souls-like is that you never think of the terrible ones, the ones that come out and no one remembers.
Ending this fucking podcast is the Souls-like of podcasts. Right. Everyone say goodbye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.